Hello, everybody, and thank you so much for joining us. My name is Lori Herrer. I am the program and volunteer coordinator for 350 Deschutes. My pronouns are she and her, and I'm located here in beautiful Bend, Oregon on this gorgeous sunny day. Thank you all so much for joining us today. We really appreciate you coming in and taking the time to learn a little bit more about fossil gas and its effects on our air quality in our homes and just ways that we can electrify our homes in order to reduce our reliance on fossil fuels. Thank you all for joining us once again. Please keep yourself muted throughout the webinar, but feel free to use the chat feature to say hi, introduce yourselves, and definitely make use of that chat feature to ask any questions of our three presenters. We'll be having them present and having a little bit of time after each presentation for you to ask your questions, but we will also at the very end of all three presentations have time for a more in-depth Q&A feature. So even if we don't have a chance to get to your question maybe right at the time that you ask it, we'll definitely clock it and get back to it by the end of today's webinar. And please be respectful in your comments. We're all here just to learn a little bit more and do our part to kind of help reduce our reliance on fossil fuels and help the planet. So please be kind, and we all would appreciate that. There we go. So for today, our agenda, how this webinar is going to go, we start right at 3, we go until about 4:15, and I will try very hard to be respectful of everybody's time and make sure that we end on time. After our brief introduction here, we'll first hear from Jim New from 350 Eugene about fracked gas. Next, we'll be hearing from Dr. David Farrer from the Oregon Health Authority about natural gas and human health. And then finally, we'll hear from Betzi Hitz on residential fuel switching. And Betzi is also from 350 Eugene. And then right at 4 o'clock, we will do our raffle. Yay! We'll have a raffle for somebody here who's attending, who stays through the whole webinar, to have a chance to win a $25 gift card to Bed Bath & Beyond. And some of the things that Bed Bath & Beyond carries are things that can help you reduce your reliance on fossil fuels, things like induction burners or electric tea kettles, or maybe some different small electric appliances. And so hopefully that $25 gift card will go to help you start electrifying and not have to rely on fossil gas so much. After that raffle, right at 4 o'clock, as I said before, we will then have a more in-depth question and answer session with our presenters. So thank you all so much for stopping by, and we're going to get started. But right before we start, just to get a sense of who's here and everybody's sort of relationship with fossil gas and some of our appliances that we like to use, I'd like to ask just a couple of quick poll questions to get us started. So our very first poll, oh goodness. Our very first poll is going to be a question about the natural gas appliances you have here. Unfortunately, my permissions are a little strange right now, so we may not be able to do that. Let's try here again. Apparently our polls are not working today, so my apologies for that. It's not a Zoom webinar unless something goes a little wrong. So I guess maybe just in the chat, if you have any natural gas appliances, please let us know. Do you have maybe a natural gas stove or oven, a water heater, a clothes dryer? Maybe you have a natural gas fireplace in your home. Feel free to share what you've got, just so that our speakers and everybody here can kind of get an understanding of what our relationship is with natural gas here in the audience. Let's see, we've got one in the chat. We've got a furnace, natural gas fireplace and stove. I myself also have a natural gas fireplace and stove. Looks like we have somebody who's got none, which is awesome. Great to hear that a few of us are electrified, which is wonderful. Looks like natural gas stove, on-demand water heater, and supplementary gas heater. Great. So thank you, everybody. Oh, and also a furnace. So thank you, everybody, for sharing with us and bearing with me. And my little poll setup didn't quite work the way I wanted it to. All right. So now that we've got an idea, at least of a little bit of what everybody's got kind of in their homes, and it looks like some of us don't have any, and some of us do have some of those more integrated natural gas appliances. We're going to hear from Jim New about fracked gas. So let me swap over to Jim's presentation, and we'll let Jim take it away. All right.
Good afternoon, and thank you, Lori. Thank everybody for attending. Today, I will be speaking to you about what the fossil fuel industry greenwashes by calling it natural gas, which is actually frack gas. The extraction process of oil and gas liquids from the ground is through vertical wells, which has been advanced to subsurface horizontal drilling called hydraulic fracturing or fracking. This pollutes at all stages of the process: site preparation, extraction, transportation, production and processing, gas compression, pipelines, and at the end use of combustion. Fracked liquefied natural gas, or LNG, was considered a bridge fuel to be used as coal extraction was eliminated due to its exorbitant carbon emissions and until renewable energy supply becomes ubiquitous. However, fracked gas has saturated the energy markets due to over-extraction, and record-setting emissions of gas have made it more polluting than coal. Also, methane leakage in the fracked gas life cycle and the intentional flaring of too much gas has contributed to this rise. This combination of anthropogenic activity has led to atmospheric concentration levels of methane that have more than doubled over the last 2 centuries, with gas production from fracking responsible for 70% in the last 20 years. Looking to the future in the United States, more than half of the states have renewable energy targets. 6 states have 100% renewable mandates by 2050, and 21 states mandate renewable goals below 100%. More than 40 cities have gas hookup moratoriums on new construction, and today renewables beat natural gas as a cheap new power source, with solar being the least expensive. But existing gas infrastructure continues to supply homes and businesses with gas to appliances, some of which have scientifically been proven to create toxic indoor air quality levels 2 to 100 times greater than outdoor levels. Gas stoves and cooktops are the only appliances not required to be vented to the outdoors. Exhaust hoods are regularly installed but not mandated to be operated, and most are woefully inefficient. Indoor emissions resulting from the combustion of gas cooktops and ovens, including formaldehyde, nitrogen dioxide, nitrogen oxide, carbon dioxide, and PM particulate matter 2.5, one of the deadliest air pollutants. Research suggests gas cooking produces about twice as much PM 2.5 particulates as electric cooking. Carbon monoxide is an invisible, odorless gas that can cause death, and research has found that the presence of gas stoves in the home is a source of carbon monoxide poisoning from malfunctioning gas appliances. These indoor air toxins lead to cardiopulmonary diseases, asthma, diabetes, and respiratory illnesses that affect most children more acutely. A Rocky Mountain Institute study finds homes with gas stoves can have nitrogen dioxide concentrations that are 50 to 100% higher than homes with electric stoves. One study found children in homes with gas stoves have a 42% higher chance of having asthma symptoms, and another study in Australia attributed 12% of all childhood asthma burden to gas stoves. The American Gas Association has known for years that these appliances emit indoor toxins, even if exhaust hoods are provided, as they are proven inefficient and rarely used. Industry and state policy tolerance of this indoor air quality pollution hazards that results in health and safety impacts to gas appliances users is puzzling. At the least, there should be a warning provided on the appliances that use of this product can cause health problems, much like the tobacco industry was required to put on their products that cause cancer. Another means of regulating gas emissions is through terms with franchise agreements between gas utilities and the cities that they operate. Franchise agreements between local governments and utilities govern the use of public right-of-ways to ensure safety, coordinated access, and the stability of public infrastructure. The franchise agreement outlines the terms and fees in which the utility can use the public right-of-way. Fees are usually set on a percentage of the gross revenues generated by the utility company for customers within the agreement service area. Through franchise agreements, cities have numerous ways to reduce carbon emissions, including prohibiting gas infrastructure in new construction, requiring the utility to incentivize customers reduce use of gas or require customers to purchase emission offsets, incentivize fuel switching of gas to electric appliances at the time of replacement, regulate the purchase and installation of gas-fueled appliances, prohibit financial incentives for purchasing gas appliances, require the gas utility to switch to biogas or renewable hydrogen, increase franchise fees and dedicate franchise fee funds to implement programs that provide incentives to switch from gas to renewable electricity, and to reduce franchise agreements from typical 20-year contracts to 5 to 10-year contracts with reviews at 3 years. In closing, the combustion of fossil fuels contributes to global climate disruption, and our future depends on an immediate and swift reduction in the burning of coal, oil, and gas. Over time, community and individual efforts will help us reduce dependence on fossil fuels and reach a sustainable future. I hope this gives incentive and knowledge on how you can make a difference in that effort. Thanks for listening.
All right, thank you very much, Jim. We are going to switch back to main presentation. There we go. All right, and I'm going to check out the chat now. Does anybody have any questions for Jim about fracked gas, or perhaps some of the industry, what some of the industry is going with the fracked gas? Please feel free to type up your questions in the chat. I'll give a few seconds for that to happen. While we wait for a potential question, one thing I would like to bring up, Jim has recently been doing a lot of work in Eugene, specifically on this gas franchise agreement, attempting to meet 350, or not 350, sorry, trying to work with Eugene's climate plan and meeting their clean energy goals, working towards changing their own franchise agreement with the natural gas industry. Oh, and here we go, the question from Diane. How has the industry gotten away with not regulating these gas appliances, Jim?
That's the million-dollar question. I don't know. I really, it's beyond fathomable that they have gotten away with being able to use these appliances that give off these emissions. We're hoping that there would at least be, if there isn't a ban on the appliances, that there would at least be a warning on them. The gas industry is very powerful, as well as the fossil fuel industry, and they have a lot of sway, and they have a lot of lobbyists, and that's probably the main reason why they are allowed to still continue to sell these products that have known health issues.
All right, well, thank you very much, Jim. I think we will move on to our next presentation unless we have any other questions going on right now in the chat, which it does not look like it. So let us go to our next presentation. I can get my screen to open up here. Sometimes these things don't want to move. Okay, sorry about that, everybody. So our next presentation is going to be by Dr. David Farrer from Oregon Health Authority. So let me pull up his presentation. All right, and go ahead and take it away, David.
Okay, thanks very much. Thanks for inviting me to participate in this webinar. So as she said, as Lori said, I'm David Farrer, a toxicologist with the Oregon Health Authority. I work on a lot of air toxics issues and also fish consumption advisories, and even some hazardous waste cleanup sites. So a pretty broad range of environmental health, toxicology kind of work that I do. And the focus of my work is mostly about cooking with natural gas, but I have a few thoughts about its broader use also. And here I'm thinking about the direct effects of combustion of natural gas and their pollutants on human health. Okay, so next slide. So indoor air quality is almost always worse than outdoor air. Exceptions include extraordinary events like the intense wildfire smoke that we all experienced this past fall. With climate change, though, we expect that those may not be so extraordinary, that we expect more frequent, longer lasting, and worse wildfires in Oregon. So there may be more times like that where we're asked to shelter in place where the outdoor air is actually worse than indoor air. So indoor air is worse than outdoor air most of the time because indoor pollutants are sheltered from elements like moisture and sunlight that can break them down, and they're trapped so they can't be dispersed and mixed with larger volumes of air. There are also indoor sources of pollution, like off-gassing volatile organic compounds that come from furniture and building materials, especially the adhesives and coatings that are on those materials. Mold spores from excess humidity can cause problems with indoor air, and activities that stir up dust, like vacuuming and dry sweeping. Moving into the topic at hand here is really combustion. Anything that you burn is going to emit pollutants into the air. That includes things like smoking, burning incense, fireplaces, wood stoves, candles, and cooking. And cooking is where I'll focus the rest of the time. Okay, so next slide, please. So burning anything results in emissions to air that can be harmful to health. And natural gas is cleaner burning than almost any fuel, emitting less particulate matter and other pollutants than other fuels when combusted. So that's what I'm trying to show with the size of these little smoke clouds above these different types of fuel. So burning wood is worse than burning coal. That's worse than burning oil, and that's worse than burning natural gas. So even though natural gas is cleaner burning than many fuels, it's not emissions free. And I wanted to point out too that even cooking with electric produces emissions that go into the pollutants that go into the indoor air. Next slide. So here are some of the component emissions from natural gas combustion. So that you have nitrogen dioxide, just the NO2, VOCs are the volatile organic compounds, and formaldehyde is listed here separately, but that is an example of a volatile organic compound. Carbon monoxide is the CO there. That's been mentioned before. That's a colorless, odorless gas that can be lethal if concentrations are high enough. PM 2.5 that's particulate matter that is 2.5 microns or smaller in diameter. And there are others. There's some metals that are emitted when burning natural gas. So all of these things can produce emissions that can harm health. Next slide. Oh, sorry, back one. Yeah, here we go. So if concentrated at high enough levels, the pollutants that I listed on the previous slide can cause health problems with the respiratory system and the heart primarily. Nitrogen dioxide can increase a child's risk of developing asthma, even if they don't have it already. And for anyone who has asthma, it can exacerbate symptoms or make them worse for anyone that already has asthma. There is a health-based national ambient air quality standard for nitrogen dioxide. And and there have been several studies where if there's no ventilation and you burn, it's possible to get indoor air concentrations of nitrogen dioxide above that standard for outdoor air, especially if you're not using ventilation. Nitrogen dioxide and other contaminants that I mentioned, especially the particulate matter, can increase the risk of acute heart events that can lead to premature death in people that have pre-existing heart conditions. And then formaldehyde and other volatile organic compounds over a lifetime can also increase the risk of getting cancer, especially lung cancer. Next slide. So because outdoor air is almost always cleaner than indoor air, the solution to most indoor air quality problems is lots of ventilation. The more frequently you can turn over the air in your house with fresh air from outside, the better the indoor air quality will be. Range hoods are an excellent way to mitigate risks related to cooking, regardless of the heating source, even if you're using electric. So if you have a range hood, there's a couple of things that are good to check. So sometimes they put in range hoods that just recirculate back into the room and don't actually vent to outside. Especially, I don't know if that's allowed now in newer construction, but that used to be allowed, in a lot of houses have a setup like that. So if you have something over your range, just look in the cupboard above it and see if there's like a vent that actually goes to outside, or if it's just recirculating back in. A California study found that less than 35% of people that have a range hood actually use it when they're cooking. And the most frequently cited reason for not using the range hood is noise. They are noisy. I think that someone might correct me if I'm wrong on this, but I believe that in Oregon, the building codes require now that any new construction that have natural gas stoves have a range hood that vents outside installed. Of course, that doesn't mean, just having it installed doesn't mean that people are using it or will use it, or that it's adequate. But I think that there is a requirement now that there is a range hood there. However, that's hasn't been there forever, and there's still a lot of older housing in Oregon and around the country that does not have ventilation hoods over gas ranges. And this is a health equity issue, because lower income families are less likely to be able to have, they're less likely to have a house with good ventilation generally, and they're also less likely to have the resources to make improvements if they're missing a range hood. So improvements in indoor air quality can be made even without a range hood by opening windows and using even something like a box fan in a window to try to improve ventilation. So there are a lot of ways to try to improve ventilation in a house, even if you don't have like a high-tech system. Some ventilation is always better than none. Okay, next. Oh, and before we go to the next slide, I also just want to mention anyone who has any gas appliances in their house really should have a working carbon monoxide monitor in their house, because any kind of malfunction that would lead to increased carbon monoxide, you won't detect that just by smell or any of your senses, because that is an odorless gas and it can be really dangerous. So that's something to check on, besides having what your ventilation status is, but also check that you do have a working carbon monoxide monitor. Okay, next slide. Burning fossil fuels contributes to global climate change, and this indirectly affects health in many, many ways. We've already talked about wildfires, and other things affect water quality. Even increased warmer and drier summers improve the conditions for cyanobacteria that produce the blue-green. Maybe you've heard of harmful algae blooms or blue-green algae. In those hotter, drier conditions, those cyanobacteria thrive and become and create big blooms that can produce toxins that can affect drinking water, and also recreational use of surface water. And also just the extreme heat events also have their own direct effects on health also. So, so it's kind of this is it is a catch-22. The more the more carbon dioxide is released into the atmosphere, the more we contribute to climate change, and the more climate change, the more wildfires occur, which releases more carbon dioxide and many other pollutants into the air. So worsening outdoor air quality along with more severe weather events associated with climate change will probably mean that people will spend more time indoors with those indoor air quality problems that we've already discussed, whether they're produced by gas stoves or the other things that we already know contribute to indoor air problems. We recently released this Climate and Health in Oregon 2020 report. It's available here. I think I've got the URL on the slide there if you're interested in looking that up. And this doesn't talk directly about or explicitly about cooking with gas stoves or natural gas appliances. This is more focused on generally how climate change is affecting the health of Oregonians and is projected to affect it more in the future. So, so I think that that's it for my presentation. I'm happy to take any questions.
Oh, okay, thank you so much, David. Let me swap our screen back. All right, thank you so much. So we do have a question that has popped up here in the chat. It's kind of a multi-parter, so let me read through this here. It says, there's research from a Union of Concerned Scientists that shows when life cycle emissions are calculated, in other words, from production to transport, storage, and final combustion, that fossil gas in many instances emits the same, if not more, emissions than coal. And so when you were kind of looking at or considering the full life cycle emissions, when you calculated the GHG emissions from burning fossil gas, did you consider that the full life cycle, or were you really just looking at the emissions at the actual act of burning it?
Yeah, so here I was focusing on the immediate health effects of being in the room with burning natural gas, and the effects of those direct emissions off the stove to you and your family while you're in the room. Okay, thanks. So overall, that may be right, that there's more greenhouse gases. And to be honest, my area of expertise isn't really that kind of greenhouse gas budgeting and analysis. I'm a toxicologist, so my expertise is more on the direct effect of chemical exposure.
Certainly. Yeah. Well, thank you for that clarification. And yeah, that is something to consider. And our other speakers kind of have touched on that a little bit more about the full life cycle of the fracked gas. One question I have for you is I have a stove and an oven that are both natural gas, and I do have a hood, which as you correctly said, I probably only use my fume hood when I'm frying something or I'm cooking something particularly smelly. So if I'm cooking in my kitchen, my windows and doors are all closed, and I'm standing at the stove for maybe about an hour cooking or sauteing or whatever that is, how dangerous or how often will the exposure of something like that start to potentially affect the health of my family?
Well, it's sort of difficult to say. It's very incremental. So it's like every time you do that, the more you do it, the worse it is. But I don't know. It's hard to say that, like, this many hours of this many occurrences of 1 hour of cooking is like enough, and to push someone over the edge into poor health. And part of that is because we're so different also. Like people have much different levels of resilience against those pollutants too. All of our bodies have mechanisms to to defend ourselves and repair damage. But if someone, for someone who is generally more medically fragile, it would be worse than for someone who's generally healthy. In public health, we try to give advice that will protect the most vulnerable. So I don't know. So the best advice moving forward that I'm trying to use myself more often is to use the hood, or just be mindful of having good ventilation when I'm cooking. Mm-hmm. Even though I have an electric range, and I think that's important to note, that even if you have an electric range, that's not zero emissions. Like anytime you're cooking something and you see stuff coming off, a lot of it's steam, but not all. Like anytime you're frying stuff, you're emitting some things into the air that could be harmful. So even if with an electric range, I think it's good to use the hood if you have one.
Use the hood. Turn over that gas. Yeah. All right. We have another question here from Peter. It says, are there concerns with older gas stoves being more polluting and having greater health impacts than the average is stated in the studies? So is an older stove going to release more gas?
Well, this is a little outside my area here, but even a really expensive natural gas stove, there's not like an emissions control. When you think about like big factories that emit things to the air, a lot of times they have requirements to have some kind of a scrubber or a control device on their stack, so that as the air goes up the stack, it gets cleaned before it comes out the stack. And no natural gas stoves have a control device like that. So even the most expensive ones have just open burning flame with no containment. So I'm not sure about the answer to that question. It could be that there may be some design features of stoves that would lead to less complete combustion, which would mean that some more methane would escape that doesn't get combusted, or it gets partially combusted into a more dangerous, so there's like a higher mix of carbon monoxide than carbon dioxide than a normal gas stove, but I'm not sure about that.
Well, thank you for that. Yeah, that's a very good question, Peter, to think about that. And you raise a good point, David, where, you'd think of industrial burning of things, and they have checks and balances in place, or big scrubbers or something to clean that. And with our gas stoves, it's just an open flame burning that stuff, and there's nothing on top of it to clean or scrub that air. All right. Any final questions? I think we have time for maybe one more question if there are. Otherwise, we can move on to our final presentation. And I'd like to repeat again, if you do have a question and maybe aren't able to type it up fast enough for us to get to it in between talks, we will have that nice Q&A session at the very end for everybody to ask more questions as we move on. All right, I think we are going to go ahead and move on to our final presentation by Betzi Hitz. Let me swap over to her presentation and we can hear about that. Too many windows open. My apologies, everybody. That's taken me a little bit to find it. All right, there we go. All right, go ahead and take it away, Betzi.
Right. Hello, everyone, and thanks for showing up today. Today, I'll tag on to what Jim New presented and share what I've learned about fuel switching, primarily in residences. Next slide. Since Eugene's electricity is much less carbon intensive than natural, or what we usually refer to as fracked gas, 350 Eugene has been advocating for fuel switching for many years. This is a newspaper ad we ran in August in which we debunked the gas industry's attempt to convince consumers that we need to continue using frack gas. Gas utilities are facing an existential threat, and instead of approaching a decarbonizing economy as an opportunity to reinvent themselves, they're digging their heels in. When the true cost of frack gas are added up, the choice to switch to electricity is clear. In Oregon, 1/3 of greenhouse gas emissions 1/3, come from residential and commercial buildings. This is from the Oregon Department of Energy, the 2020 Biennial Energy Report. Next slide, please. Focusing on Oregon homes. Those heated primarily with frac gas has held steady through 2018 at nearly 40%. That's a lot of methane, the primary greenhouse gas emitted from frac gas. It is 86 times more potent than carbon dioxide. This is over 20 years, the first 20 years of emission. According to Eugene's 2017 greenhouse gas inventory, 30,000 frac gas customers, 30,000, created 11 times more greenhouse gas emissions than 86,000 electricity customers. That's 30,000 frac gas, 86,000 electricity customers. This is a main argument in support of fuel switching. So this is the statement that I have bolded in my presentation here. Every major study on meeting climate goals at state, national, and international levels calls for fueling buildings with renewable electricity rather than fossil fuels. Next slide. For the purposes of this presentation, I'm defining fuel switching as the process of replacing dirty, non-renewable fossil fuels with clean, renewable fuels. And its obvious cousin, building electrification, is the substitution of gas heaters and appliances with safe, clean, and highly efficient all-electric alternatives. Next slide. There are at least 5 benefits of building electrification, and they are, next slide. Number 1, better indoor air quality. Indoor gas combustion increases risk of asthma, heart attack, and stroke. Children with asthma have a 42% increased risk of symptoms. Next slide. Number 2, safety. Use of frac gas in homes is responsible for nearly half of all US residential house fires. That's an average of 4,200 home structure fires annually, according to the National Fire Protection Agency. Daily, local fire departments respond to an average of 340 natural and propane gas leaks. And I was interested to learn that dead, dying, or stunted plants inside or outside your home can be a potential sign of a gas leak, especially if you've been taking proper care of your plants. So that's important to do that. Symptoms of exposure to low levels of gas in humans and likely pets include headaches, dizziness, fatigue, nausea, and irregular breathing. High levels of gas exposure can cause poisoning, characterized by fatigue, severe headaches, memory problems, loss of concentration, nausea, loss of consciousness, and suffocation. Next slide. Number 3 reason to electrify buildings is savings. And let's see, let's go on to the next slide here. Note the blue summary box of this cost comparison of a new all-electric versus a new mixed fuel home in the Bay Area, which shows both building capital costs, which are building costs, and energy cost savings. And the savings increase substantially when paired with rooftop solar. Number 4. Next slide, yes. Equity. All electric new construction can reduce costs of building low-income housing. For disadvantaged populations that spend a disproportionate amount of their income on energy and who are more likely to suffer from asthma due to poor indoor air quality, zero-emission homes are an important opportunity to deliver social equity benefits. Next slide. Benefit number 5, smaller carbon footprint. The bars of this graph show carbon emission reductions over time, starting in 2020, 2030, then 2050, from mixed fuel versus all electric buildings in California. So look at the yellow bars. The yellow bars are emissions from gas. You'll see they stay the same over that entire time. From, let's see, the yellow bars are gas, solid is combustion, and slanted is leakage. So it looks like the leakage gets slightly less, but the combustion stays about the same over time. Then look at the green bars. The green solid bars are indirect emissions from electricity generation. The slanted lines, which actually aren't part of my presentations, but you might be wondering what they are, that's refrigerant leakage. So looks like we're hoping to get substantially better with stopping the leakage of refrigerants. But what's important to notice here is that all of the emissions go down over time. Gas stays about the same. Electricity goes down substantial, and this has to do with cleaning up the grid. As electricity from California grid gets cleaner over time, all electric buildings will eventually stop producing greenhouse gas emissions. In the US, we have the opportunity to meet nearly all of our buildings' energy needs with electricity from an increasingly low carbon electric grid, eliminating direct fossil fuel use in buildings and making obsolete much of the gas distribution system, along with its cost and safety challenges. Next slide, please. So I found the sources of Oregon's electricity generation. The most recent data available as of October of last year shows that 63% of Oregon's electricity was generated from clean sources. So you'll see 43% coming from hydroelectric and 20% from other renewables, wind and solar. And the remainder by fossil fuels, 35% by frack gas and 2% by coal, and this is imported energy from out of state. Now, what's important to think about here is the prediction that our Oregon snowpack is going to be really impacted by higher temperatures. And it's predicted that by 2040, there won't be any snowpack. And so that's going to impact our ability to generate by hydroelectric. So we need to promote solar, wind, and I would say wave, and probably some other sources, maybe hydrogen. Next slide, please. These benefits of electrification should make it easy to think about replacing your gas furnace, water heater, cooking range or stove, and dryer at the end of their service lives with electric versions. There might be two sticking points here. The gas industry claims that gas furnaces and stoves are reliable during an electrical outage. However, they usually have electric igniters and cannot be ignited manually. The other sticking point is the love affair some cooks have with their gas stoves. Thanks in large part to gas company advertising, gas stoves like granite countertops and stainless steel refrigerators have become a coveted kitchen symbol of wealth, discernment, and status, not to mention a selling point for builders and realtors. Next slide, please. The technology of induction cooking is the remedy here. Induction cooking takes place on a flat glass surface equipped with heating coils powered by electromagnetic energy that's only activated by the iron in cookware. When the iron makes contact with the active heaters, the iron particles agitate, causing the pan to heat up quickly, resulting in more energy efficiency and cost savings than gas or traditional electric. When you turn the burner off, the heat transfer stops immediately. So there's less of a chance of foods boiling over or overcooking. The pan heats up while the cooktop remains cool and safe to touch. It doesn't emit gas into the air, and it won't catch objects like pot holders on fire because it only heats items containing iron. The downsides: induction cooktops currently cost more than gas or traditional electric ranges, but not a lot more. The cheapest induction ranges start at $1,000, which is only a couple $100 more than a mid-tier gas or freestanding electric range. And one may need to buy new cookware. However, most stainless steel and all cast iron cookware will work, and those are among the most common materials for cooking. If a magnet sticks to the bottom of a pot, it's induction ready. An alternative to buying an induction range is to purchase a single or double plug-in induction burner, and the price of these standalone burners starts at $52. Next slide, please. Replacing a gas furnace or water heater with a ductless heat pump for space or water heating certainly makes sense. A ductless heat pump with a built-in air conditioner, which I have one right up there on my wall, I love it, is cheaper to install and operate than any other heating system. These figures on this slide here compare annual heating costs of various fuels, and you'll see oil, we don't really deal with that here in this state, but there's your electric furnace, propane, electric baseboard, gas furnace. Way down there at the bottom, that tiny little bar, that's a heat pump. When I moved into my house, the first thing I did was I had the heat pump installed to take the place of my really crummy baseboard heat. And boy, did I see a change in the sound and how my house felt and my bills. Next slide, please. Gas fireplace inserts are basically methane flaring units. An electric version is certainly less polluting, but neither is an efficient source of heat. Rather, they are simply a source of creating ambiance. Next slide. As we know, economics can drive or sabotage change. Financial incentives in the form of discounts, rebates, tax credits, and 0% loans are helping usher in fuel switching. Next slide, please. The Eugene Water and Electric Board currently offers rebates running from $800 to $3,800, depending on the type of heat pump purchased and income level. Next slide. Here's an incentive I especially like, as it combines a sale price, unfortunately now expired, a local utility incentive, so that's our eWeb mail-in rebate there. And it also informs about the federal tax credit, which is still valid on heat pumps and water heater pumps, that $300 rebate good through December of this year. Next slide. State policy makers play a critical role in building electrification because they set codes and standards, they regulate utilities, and they determine incentive programs. Building electrification opportunities do exist at the federal and city levels, but are more limited in scope, that would be federal, and scale, that would be city, respectively, than state action. Now, Biden's campaign did promise to implement new appliance and building efficiency standards. More stringent federal rules could motivate builders to ditch gas hookups in new construction. Next slide. Jim has described the use of franchise agreements in the pursuit of fuel switching in our cities, and I'll take a shallow dive into 3 other tactics used at the city level. Next slide. At least 42 California cities have strengthened building codes to discourage expanding gas hookups in new construction. So Berkeley was the first city in the nation to pass an ordinance prohibiting natural gas infrastructure, which means gas hookups, in all new buildings by amending their municipal building code. Cities in Massachusetts, New York, and Washington are following suit. The city of Portland has enacted another brilliant tactic for decreasing both indoor air pollution and greenhouse gas emissions. Sellers of single-family homes are required to obtain and disclose a home energy report, which estimates energy-related use, associated costs with that energy, and cost-effective solutions to improve the home's efficiency. I think home energy scores should be mandatory everywhere. That way people will they will compare homes when they're purchasing, and that will motivate people to get on board with these ideas. Another approach used by more than 20 California cities is the adoption of what's called a REACH code, which is a local building code that reaches beyond the state minimum requirements for energy use in building design and construction. REACH codes provide an opportunity to train the building and development communities and advanced practices before the underlying energy code is improved and help accelerate market acceptance and adoption. Next slide. Oregon has started the process of crafting an Oregon residential REACH code. The anticipated effective date is April 1st of this year. Unfortunately, in Oregon, REACH codes are voluntary, both by builders and by city building departments. It appears this disconnect exists because powerful home builder interests have co-opted the state government. To fix that, there is an initiative this year by the League of Oregon Cities and Metropolitan Mayors Consortium to allow cities to individually decide whether to make the REACH code mandatory. Next slide. Across the US, fuel switching is being promoted in some states and blocked in others. The purple states you see on this slide show where local building gas bans and electrification codes have either been adopted or are in development. The pink states are those that have either passed or introduced prohibition against local measures to block access to utility service based on fuel type. It seems prudent to protect our local powers to move forward with fuel switching. Let's see, next slide. There's a battle. On one side are citizens and elected leaders trying to go greener, and on the other are real estate developers in the frack gas industry. The multi-billion-dollar gas industry has built crucial coalitions and hired high-powered operatives to torpedo cities' anti-gas policies. While it's still a David and Goliath struggle, I think the tide is turning in favor of the climate. There is evidence of action all around. There are rapid advancements in technology and clean energy. Increasingly, businesses are practicing sustainability. More people are concerned and speaking out, especially young people. Now, I thank you for your attention and for your action.
Thank you so much, Betzi. That was a wonderful presentation and provided a lot of really great potential solutions to people who perhaps have fossil gas appliances or fossil gas in their home and are looking for trying to consider ways to reduce it. So thank you so much for that presentation. I will now open the floor for any questions, specifically for Betzi on natural gas, on residential fuel switching. Goodness. We do have a note from Diane specific to Central Oregon, just because we're talking a lot about your neck of the woods, which is over in Eugene. But apparently Central Oregon does have incentives for electrification. That's Energy Trust of Oregon that provides those. And if you call and tell them that you are fuel switching to electric, they will provide some of those incentives, but apparently they don't promote fuel switching. So if you want to fuel switch, you need to sort of tell them and use that keyword here in Central Oregon, and then that will help you get those incentives here in Central Oregon, or throughout all of Oregon. Energy Trust operates throughout all of Oregon. So that works. I did want to say on the idea of using a sort of countertop induction burner rather than being able to fully switch over is, as I've said before in this webinar, I do have a natural gas stove, but I did buy one of those little tabletop induction burners to be able to use. It's just a single burner. I believe it only cost maybe $60, and I love to use it particularly for boiling large pots of water, or even boiling water for tea, because it makes it go so much faster. For one, the water boils way faster, but also I don't have this giant pot sitting over this gas that's pumped way up as high as it possibly can go for a solid 15 minutes or so just to get that water up to temperature. So it's a pretty handy thing, and it's allowing me, without putting forth the cost of fully switching over my gas stove, which right now is not a financial thing that we're doing. We're still able to reduce our use of natural gas as much as possible in our home. So that's something I would highly recommend to anybody else who perhaps can't switch over their natural gas stove for whatever reason, or their fossil gas stove for whatever reason. So looking at the time here, it is 3:55. So I think now we are going to get into raffling off the Bed Bath & Beyond gift card. Oh, that was a final poll question, which again, our polls aren't necessarily working today. But I will use a randomizer for our guests who are here to try to get, to figure out who of our lucky attendees is going to win this Bed Bath & Beyond gift card. So let me open our participants, do a little randomization, and looks like Peter Dragovich, you are our lucky winner. Congratulations. Yay. Congratulations, Peter. We will be contacting you. We have your contact information from your registration about picking up that gift card. So congratulations to you, Peter. Looks like lots of yays in the chat. That's awesome. All right. So now we can enter into our Q&A session. I will keep up the chat open, and anybody is welcome to ask a question of one or all of our panelists. Looks like there's a question for me about which brand I got of induction burner, and unfortunately I will have to get up and go look at it because I don't know it off the top of my head. But if we have any general questions for any of our panelists, I will happily get that going. All right. So here's a couple of questions that I've got. Let's see. Okay, so if I have fossil gas appliances in my home, what can I do today to either reduce my use of fossil gas or at the very least make it so that my air quality in my home is a little bit better, so that I'm not in danger of that incremental slowly adding more potential health risk to my family. Let's ask whomever wants to jump in first. All right, go ahead, Jim.
Well, first of all, I would try to get on a plan of fuel switching, like a dollar cost average thing, where every week maybe you threw $5 in a jar or $10 in a jar, and eventually you'll be able to replace an appliance down the road. I would say your dryer is probably your easiest to limit the use of gas on. You can hang clothes out on the line. I always try to take all of my shirts and jeans and all that stuff on a nice day and hang it outside. This way it eliminates a whole load of drying. So the dryer is probably the easiest one to do. You can limit how many loads you do. The cheapest appliance to replace if you have a 220 volt electric outlet would be a dryer, because they're the least expensive of most of your appliances, whether gas or electric. Fireplace, I would say only use that when electricity goes out, if it will even start. Like Betzi says, they're just basically a methane flaring unit. I thought that was a great a great description of a gas fireplace. That was perfect. Water heaters, take short showers, limit your dishwashings in your dishwasher, cold water washes for your clothes washers, cold water washes for your clothes wash. Furnace, lower the thermostat. Weatherization of your home, close off the rooms that are not in use. And on an oven, I wouldn't bake, just try to limit the amount of times you have to turn the oven on to bake. And with a cooktop, all I can say is just ventilate the room adequately. But that's all I have. If anybody else has more, that'd be great.
Great, thanks, Jim.
Yeah, I was just going to follow up on the. Yeah, I was just going to follow up about the ventilation, like in terms of mitigating health risks from the immediate being around the immediate vicinity of burning stuff. Like ventilation is what it's all about. And like I said, it's best if you have an over the range venting hood, but not everybody does. And if you don't, it's like even opening windows and turning on fans is better than nothing. Like any ventilation is better than no ventilation. So.
All right, thank you, David. Anything to add, Betzi?
The only thing two things, actually. One is serious, one is less serious. Just the keeping in mind that when an appliance it dies, when your gas appliance dies and you're going to replace it, obviously go with electric. And the other is you could consider eating more raw foods.
More raw foods, there you go. Everybody could use to eat a little bit more salad these days, right? All right, so it looks like we have another couple of suggestions. One from Paula saying that she has a solar oven that she uses and absolutely loves it. And she's able to use it throughout the year. So if you're really into baking and you happen to have a gas oven, at the very least, you could try a solar oven. Those things are wonderful to use, and they don't use electric or gas. They're just using the direct energy from the sun. So that's a great way to go for saving all kinds of energy. And it looks like somebody has a portable induction cooktop by New Wave, and so they're recommending that one as a good one. So for the before question about what's a good brand, that's one brand that one of our attendees says is a great way to go. All right. Looks like, do we have any more questions for anybody else in our chat? We can go ahead and finish up then. Thank you so much to our presenters for coming and providing such wonderful information. Thank you so much to our attendees for coming and joining us today. We will make this video or a series of videos from this webinar available online. So if you want to come back and see it, or maybe recommend a friend or a coworker to check out what was said here today, we will make those available again, either on YouTube or through our website. So thank you so much, everybody. Have a good one.